This is a add-on from the last lesson in which I talked about intervals. Now, understanding intervals and understanding what makes a minor versus a major chord is always going to be helpful to you. Okay, that's very like foundational music theory. It doesn't matter what genre you're playing, what song you're playing, it's always going to help you because those are the rules. Those are what the intervals are called. So it doesn't matter if you're playing a, a minor pentatonic over a blues progression or a minor pentatonic over a major chord. Those intervals are still going to matter, and so is the understanding of what a major chord is. Basically, the root, perfect fifth, and your major third. Minor chord is the only difference. It's a minor third. It's a half step shifted down. That's going to be applicable to you no matter what. And the reason I'm talking about this is because when you learn music theory, once you get past intervals and knowing what a chord is and the chord structure, there are rules, but those rules are meant to be broken. So the stuff I'm going to be talking about today, like a lot of your favorite songs don't follow these rules, but it's helpful to know it just because this is the sort of like basic blueprint, but it's not a hard and fast rule. That's the point I'm trying to get across. So we learned what the major intervallic structure is for the diatonic chord. It's 7 notes, and the formula is whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step into the octave, right? If we do G major, you can play it in a variety of different positions, variety of different ways, but we'll do G major, right? Some people like to stretch. Haven't done that in a while. But if we just focus on this high E string, we can just do it on just one string, right? Again, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. One easy way to remember it is when you hit your octave, you always want to be a half step behind. Okay, so that's a rule. Okay, so, but what I want to do today is talk about harmonizing the major scale or harmonizing the major chord progression. And that's basically just taking the G major scale and just harmonizing it. And it holds true in any key. The reason I picked G major is kind of a compromise. I mean, we can pick C major, in which case we're not going to encounter any sharps or flats, right? No sharps or flats in C major, but we're going to be all the way up to the 21st fret. We can do F major, but that's going to introduce a lot of sharps and flats, and it might be confusing. G major is a good sort of middle ground because we're only going to have one sharp, and that's F sharp. And why do we have an F sharp? You should already know this because it is a half step before the tonic, the G. Okay, so you don't really need to know caged to know this, but there is a specific formula for harmonizing the chord progression. The only thing you need to know for this lesson is the bar chord. G major, right? G minor. Well, you should already know that. That's always going to be true. But harmonizing the chord progression might not always be true just because a lot of music, they use chords that are not in this formula. But this formula is the basic blueprint. So the point I'm trying to get across is this is good to know. It's actually essential to know, but it's not a hard and fast rule. And when you're writing music, you don't have to write chords specifically in this manner. But if you do, they sound, sensible, or they sound pleasing to the ear. And the last video, I also didn't really adequately describe what a diminished chord is. So it would be helpful to hear a diminished chord in context, right? So again, we're only going to be using the bar chord for G major. Not only that, we're going to be using, so if you're familiar with caged, we're only going to be using the last 3 strings. Okay, so this, if I do, the tonic is always going to be on the high E string, and your major minor third is always going to be your G string, Your perfect fifth is always going to be on the B string. So we're only going to be using these three strings, and so if we're using the bar chord shape, the only shapes we can use are, and then covering the entire, that's a minor, right? Okay, so in order to harmonize the major progression, and if you understand harmonizing the major progression, you already know how to harmonize the minor progression. You just start at your sixth chord. It's a little trickier just because you have to flatten all your major chords, but it's the same formula. So we're just going to stick with the major chord progression, harmonizing the major chord progression. So luckily we already have, half of our homework is already done because it follows the exact same intervallic structure as the major scale. Whole step, half step, whole step, half step. So we're just going to be doing this, and it's helpful to understand this on a theory level, meaning to understand, okay, this is your major third, perfect fifth, right? And if we're doing a minor, this is going to be your minor third because it's a half step down. If we wanted to make it major, we'd put a half step here, right? Okay, so starting with G major. It's this chord here, and we're only going to use, again, the last three strings. So, right, and then we go G, A, and what have you. So what we have is G major, A minor, B minor, and then we only go a half step, and it's a major, and then another whole step. That is our octave. So I'm going to kind of break that down a little bit. Okay, so the formula for harmonizing a major chord progression is, okay, so this is our one chord. Last video I talked about intervals. Don't think in terms of intervals. Now we're thinking in terms of chords, so there's no such thing as zero. So this is not a zero. This is your one chord. It's a G, right? So your one chord is always going to be major. Your two chord is always going to be minor. Your three chord is always going to be minor. Your four chord is always going to be major, and it's only a half step. Your next chord is also going to be a major, and it's a whole step. Your next chord is going to be a minor. And your last chord is going to be a diminished. Now we repeat. So the point is, your one is always a major chord, major triad. Your two is always going to be minor. Your three is always going to be minor. Your four is always going to be major. Your five is always going to be major. Your six is always going to be minor. And your seven is always going to be diminished. And this is an F sharp diminished. Okay, so, and then you go back to your tonic or your one chord. So that's very helpful in terms of understanding what a diminished chord is. Again, the formula for the actual notes is whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, half step. Okay, so we're going a whole step, and the two is a minor. Doing another whole step, and the three is a minor. Going a half step only, but your next one is a major. Your next one is also a major. We're doing a whole step. And then your next one is a major, or I'm sorry, it's a minor, and it's another whole step. And this is your diminished chord. Right? So again, this is your major third, and your perfect fifth is next. Major third, root. Major third, perfect fifth, root. Minor third, perfect fifth, root. Minor third, perfect fifth, root. Major third, perfect fifth, root. Major third, perfect fifth, root. Minor third, perfect fifth. Minor third, perfect fifth, root. This is your diminished chord. But, if I were to just play this like by itself. it wouldn't really have any context. It sounds a little bit dissonant. It sounds okay, right? But there's no context for it. But if we actually do the actual progression, it makes total sense, right? So that is the formula. Again, you follow your major diatonic scale intervallic formula. So it's always going to be whole step, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step. Last one is a half step. So I hope that makes sense, because again, your tonic is always going to be on the high E string. And all we're doing is we're adding, so we have these notes, right, of your major scale. All we're doing is we're adding the chord portion. So we're adding the perfect fifth, and we're adding either a major third or a minor third, right? So we start with a major third. And then the minor third, just lay your index finger or whatever finger flat, because this is from the caged shape, right? So the last three strings are all in sequence, the same fret. So again, this is a little confusing, but again, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step into your root or your one chord. So when we're talking about harmonizing the progression, you're starting with your one chord, right? And then your two chord, it's going to be minor. Your three chord, it's going to be minor. And then when you go to your four chord, you have to remember you're only a half step up. So we're not going another whole step. We're just doing a half step, but it's a major. And then next is a whole step. Next is another whole step. Next is another whole step. Oops, I think I missed a half step there. But to sum it all up, again, that's all we're doing is taking the G major scale on the high E string, and we're creating triads out of every single note in order for them to sound, or to quote unquote harmonize the progression. Again, this is a kind of a rule, but then this rule is broken all the time. But it's really helpful to know this. It's really kind of foundational. So again, it's and this diminished chord here, it's just, again, this is your root, F sharp. This is your flat 5 or your diminished fifth. Right, and this is going to be your minor third. So if we do an F sharp bar chord, we know the minor third is here. Right. That's your minor third. And if we were to just do it on the chord, it wouldn't sound as great, just because. So we're doing it in a triad here. So if you see this shape, like it's like a flip from a D major chord, right? D major, you have 2 frets here. In this shape, you're doing 1 fret behind. Every time you hear that, it's diminished. Right? So again, it's two parts. The first part is getting the G major scale. Using only those notes. You cannot use like, because then that would be the minor scale, right? You use your major scale formula. Whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. And all we're doing is we're adding the perfect fifth and either the major third or the minor third. And again, the formula is your first is a major, your second is a minor, your third is a minor, your fourth is a major, your fifth is a major, your sixth is a minor, your seventh is a diminished, and go back to the one chord, right? That's just an octave. And you can do this starting on any note. So that's basically harmonizing the major chord. And once you know that, you can harmonize the minor chord, if you notice, because we're in G major, and if you're doing pentatonic stuff, I mean, this is like guitar 101. You know your relative minor is E minor, right? And we actually do E minor here. Now, if you were to count, this is our 6th. So if you want to do a minor chord progression, it's exactly the same. So imagine it like a circle. So we have our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then we go back to the 1 chord. So if you want to harmonize a minor progression, you just start with the 6th chord, and your second naturally is going to be a diminished because it's the 7th from the major chord progression. So your second is a diminished if you're harmonizing a minor chord. But we're just not gonna, we don't have to go there right now. We're just doing major chord, okay? It's important to learn the major chord first, okay? Right? That is the diminished chord right here. It might sound a little bit dissonant by itself, but when it's in proper context, in harmony with the major scale, it sounds pleasing to the ears. That's one of the main reasons I wanted to make this video, is just because last video I didn't really explain what a diminished chord is and why it, why you want to have a diminished chord, but it's a very basic part of music theory. Is your 7th chord is always going to be diminished if you're in a minor, or if you're in a major chord progression. So again, just use your major scale formula. Get a major scale. And you can start on different frets. You can start with C. Right? Or you can start on any note. But use your major scale formula, which is whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. And then the other part of the formula is your 1 chord, it's a major because we're harmonizing the major scale. Your 2 chord is a minor. Your 3 chord is a minor. Your 4 chord is a major. Your 5 chord is a major. Your 6th chord is a minor, and your 7th chord is a diminished. Again, a diminished is root, minor 3rd, diminished 5th. So a half step down from a perfect 5th. Like I showed in my last video, this is an A5 power chord, right? If we want to do an A diminished power chord, we just move it a half step down. So it kind of sounds dissonant when you don't have the minor 3rd in there, right? When you have a minor 3rd, you have more and you have even more context when you're harmonizing an actual chord progression. So it makes total sense. It sounds totally sensible and pleasing to the ears doing that diminished chord progression. So I hope this video wasn't all that confusing. Again, as opposed to knowing your intervals and your formula for the major scale, your minor scale, and your chord formula, like what is a major chord, what is a minor triad, those are inflexible rules. But these rules, like harmonizing a major chord progression, you can break this rule. You can write a song that is out of key, okay, that doesn't use all the chords in this progression, right? You may use an F major or an F, what have you, whereas we should be using an F sharp diminished. Now, you can use a F chord, F major, F minor, and it might sound great. And a lot of music is like that. But this is just kind of like a blueprint. So this is a rule, but it's meant to be broken. I hope that makes sense.